Patience is bitter, but its fruits is sweet. Aristotle. Let's go ahead and get into it. Now, when Sabata left his dressing room, or should I say when he left the building, he went outside and was, waiting for his ride. And lo and behold, his ride was nowhere to be found. Ain't that about you sitting here, you just had a frustrating fight. Then you get outside and your ride's not there. So he's trying to be cool. He's trying to keep his patience, and he's just standing outside on the street. Here, you just in the ring. People was out there, they cheering for you 1 minute. Now you stand outside looking like you're waiting on a bus stop or something. You're waiting for your ride. Can you imagine how embarrassing that must have been for him? Can you imagine that? Man. So anyway, he's waiting, looking up and down the block, trying to be cool, trying not to trip. So he kind of made sure he blended in. He put his hoodie over his head, and had his head down a little bit, So you didn't really recognize him. At least that's what he was hoping, right? So as he's looking in one direction, trying to see, where Mr. Ray's coming from, he noticed this SUV kind of slowly moving down the street. How somebody's like, they're about to stop, and the car is kind of like, cruising along, kind of like, other cars riding past. This one is slowly moving, coming towards his direction. And he's kind of keeping his eye on the car, like, yo, who's that? Like, you sitting there, you see a car pulling up to you with tinted windows. It's a big SUV. Windows like pitch black, you can't even see through them. You're going to be looking at it too. And that's what Sabata was doing. He's looking at it like, who's this rolling up? And lo and behold, it stops right in front of where he's standing. Now he really like, oh, dang. And then he's looking up down the block. Yo, man, where the hell is Mr. Ray, man? You don't know if somebody's going to jump out. He don't know if they recognize him. And if you stare long enough, you're going to know it's him. So he's kind of, trying not to act paranoid or anything like that. But he's keeping his eye on the SUV like who's about to, And it sits there. To make it worse, the SUV just sits there for a little bit, kind of like just, the engine's still running and it's just sitting there. No four-way flashes, nothing, just sitting there. So here he goes standing on the sidewalk. He got an SUV kind of like double parked sitting there with tinted windows. And so it's like anybody's move type thing. So then after what seemed like forever, the door opens up. The passenger door. And this man jumps out. But he don't jump out. He kind of steps out real smooth. And he's dressed sharp. He got a nice suit on and everything like that, looking real expensive. He looks at Sabata. And Sabata's like, yeah, he recognized me. Dang. And the big smile comes on the man's face. And he says, Sabata Brown. And he walks over to him, strolling over with a cigar in his hand. Big balls type stuff, right? So, he walks over to Sabata and he's like, yay. And he's like, that was a hell of a show you put on there tonight. So Sabata's cool, like, yeah, thanks. And the man looks at Sabata and he says, you finish all your opponents like that? And Sabata says, nah, just the ones I like. And the man chuckles. He said, and what about the ones you don't like? And Sabata says, well, I drag the fight out as long as possible, for as many rounds as possible. I make them suffer. And the big smile comes on that man's face and smoke comes out of his mouth and he starts laughing. But he didn't laugh like that. But just picture a laugh of a man who got, he's up to something. He's up to something. Then he's like, yeah, I'm black. And Sabata look at the man. The man is big, dark. He's big and he's definitely black. Real dark-skinned dude. So Sabata says, yeah, me too. And the man looks at Sabata like, for a second. He starts laughing like, nah, that's my name. That's what they call me. I'm black. And then so Sabata's like, oh, word. Oh, my, yeah. Nice, good to meet you, man, whatever. And so they both kind of get a laugh at that point. It breaks the ice a little bit, The tension's a little broken. So once they stop laughing, Black, he stares at Sabata, just looking at him now. He's standing there looking at quiet. Nobody saying anything, and he takes a puff from his cigar, and he blowing out smoke and just looking at him. So now it's getting awkward again, right? It was getting cool. And now it's getting awkward again because the man, he takes it back and he's looking at him like, yeah. But he's not saying anything, right? You can imagine somebody staring at you and like, yeah. But they're not saying anything. That's weird, right? So that's what the man was doing. He like, looking at Sabata. And so Sabata's like, yo, you gonna say something? So anyway, so he says, tell you what, Sabata, you just might be what I'm looking for. So he's standing for a while, and after a while, he's like, you might look for us. Now it's really getting weird. Like, look what I'm looking for. And Sabata's like, keeping cool about it. He's like trying to be respectful. So he's like, he's like, yo, are you a promoter or something like that? You a fight promoter? And he's like, nah, more like a manager. And Sabata says, nah, I'm good. And then he said, "No, you sure? Because I think you might be what I'm looking for." And Sabata's like, "Here you go, what I'm looking for." It's just weird, you know what I mean? And he said, "Looking for what?" And so Black is like, "I represent fighters, but not just any fighters. They gotta be tough. They gotta be hungry. They gotta want it. They gotta love to fight. And from what I saw in that ring, I can tell you love to fight. And I'm sure you love making money, don't you?" And then Sabata's like, "Well, who doesn't?" So he says, "I tell you what, Sabata, you get down with me, I'll get you a whole lot of fights and a whole lot of money." And then Sabata's like, "Man, you a promoter, aren't you?" And then he's like, "No, like I told you, I'm not no promoter. I'm more like a manager." Sabata's like, "I already have a manager. I'm good." And at this point, he look at Sabata, he look him up and down, take a puff of his cigar, and just start busting out laughing. Sabata's like, is he laughing at me? And he said, man, looking at Sabata, he says, I could see that's working out real good for you. That manager's doing a whole lot for you, isn't he? He said, "Tell you what, Sabata, let me ask you a question. How much money did you make from this fight tonight?" And he gets quiet. Ooh, it gets quiet. Sabata, he thought about answering, but then he seen where he was going with it. And he just kept his mouth shut. He wasn't trying to throw that number out there. He didn't want to get laughed at again. So, Black recognized that he's a little uncomfortable with that question. So he said, you know what? Don't even worry about answering it. Don't even worry about it. Tell you what. Just hit me up when you're ready to put some real money in your pocket. All right? And with that, he takes, goes into his pocket and hands Sabata his card. Now, Sabata, he may not have a lot of money, but he had a whole lot of pride. A whole lot of pride and quite a bit of ego. So he looked at that card like, man, if you don't put that thing back in your pocket, I ain't taking that. And Black looked at him. Now, Black, he was this man looked like he was, pushing 60 or something like that. But the kind that like they take good care of themselves. That guy that's 60 years old, but you still don't want to mess with him. That 60-year-old that's still, if he had to fight, yeah, he's beating the majority of young guys. He's gonna give some problems. That's what Black looked like. So Black kind of looking back at Sabata like, yo, I ain't with nobody ass in a long time, but man, you better take this card. He kind of gave him a look real subtle though. He didn't say it. They kind of, the war of the eyes for a moment there. But when he looked at Sabata, he seen Sabata didn't budge. So Black, he calmly kind of, just looked at him. He said, "Oh, you're not going to take it?" And Sabata stood firm. He said, "Man, I told you, man. I already have a manager." And Sabata's demeanor showed that he wasn't trying to disrespect him. He was just being loyal. And he liked that too. He can tell that he was loyal from the stance he took. And he just, took another puff of his cigar. He blew out the smoke. Then he said, Sabata, there's a thin line between loyalty and stupidity. And you're walking on it. And he said, you know what? I've been where you're at. Yeah, I used to be a fighter myself. And I've learned there comes a time when you gotta look out for yourself. And you gotta do what's best for you. Spider kind of nodded. And he said, yeah. And that's what I'm doing. And Black was silenced once again. He said, this man, I tell you, this boy, man, it's not easy. When Black saw that Sabata wasn't budging, he just raised his eyebrows, tucked that card right back in his pocket. Then he nodded at Sabata. Well, nice meeting you, Sabata Brown. You take care now. And with that, he turned around, strolled right back into that car. Just as smooth as he got out, he sat back down in that nice, clean SUV. And Sabata watched him sit down in that clean SUV. As he watched that clean SUV smoothly drive away down the street. And then he was back to looking, wondering, where the hell is my ride? Moments later, Mr. Ray came down. Mr. Ray pulled down the street with his Honda Accord. Sabata hopped in the car, looked at Mr. Ray, and turned out Mr. Ray was eating on a muffin and sipping on some coffee. Sabata looked at him and was like, man, what took you so long? And Mr. Ray didn't even answer that question. He returned it with a question of his own. He said, yo, who was that you was talking to? Sabata decided to mess with him a little bit, and he said, that just some big time manager said he can make me a whole lot of money, give me some big fights, no big deal. And so Mr. Ray looked at him and said, he didn't even look at him at this point. He just kept on eating his muffin, and then he said, what did you say to him? He said, what do you mean what I say? I didn't say anything. He was doing all talking. He just, gave me, offered me his card and everything like that. And Mr. Ray was like, did you take it? Pardon me, it's lunchtime. That's how Mr. Ray was. So he said, I said, no, I didn't take it. But if I would known you going to be sitting here eating a muffin and getting some coffee while I'm waiting for you, maybe I would have taken it. So Mr. Ray didn't pay him any mind at that point. He said, whatever. And they just drove off. Sabata thought to himself, did I make the right decision? To be continued.